Hello, my name is Taylor Moorman, and I'm here to take you through cybersecurity and its implications. So, first of all, let's begin with what is cybersecurity? Cybersecurity, as defined by Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is measures taken to protect a computer or computer system, as on the internet, against unauthorized access or attack. And the first reported use of the term came in 1994, so a relatively new term, especially in the realm of technology. Only been talking about it for 22 years or so. So next, what is a data breach? Well, the ITRC, or the Identity Theft Resource Center, defines a breach as the following: an incident in which an individual name plus a social security number, driver's number, medical record, or financial record is potentially put at risk because of exposure. The ITRC is an independent nonprofit organization that specializes in providing victim assistance and consumer education on the subject of cybersecurity. So next, just how big of a problem is this? We hear about cybersecurity, we hear about it in the news, and we hear about it especially as CIS majors in pretty much all of our classes. How big of a problem really is this? Well, first of all, it was reported by Symantec, an independent cybersecurity firm, that records are lost or stolen at a rate of 47 records per second. Next, the National Small Business Association states that 50% of all small businesses have been the victim of a hack within the last calendar year. So just goes to show that these happen all across all levels, not just big corporations, but even small businesses as well. The ITRC reported 780 national level data breaches in the 2015 calendar year. I've seen estimates that are even higher than that. Lastly, though, 70% of Americans worry that hackers will steal their credit card info from retailers, and just over a quarter of Americans state that they have had their information stolen within just the last year. A very big issue, and especially as technology continues to expand in the way that we use it, and that it becomes more and more integrated into our everyday lives and also into our business practices, it's important that we take steps to safeguard this information and safeguard our processes so that these things don't happen as often. This infographic from Breach Level Index just goes to show the number of breach incidents by source over time. As we can see, malicious outsiders, is something I'll get to in a second, constitute the biggest number of breaches over the last 2 years. Accidental loss being the second, then malicious insiders being the third highest. This just goes to show the number of records breached by industry: government, healthcare, technology, financial, education. Overall, over 700 million records breached during the year of 2015. So how do these data breaches happen? Well, the ITRC Symantec recognizes 3 different major types of breaches. These are well-meaning insiders, targeted attacks, and malicious insiders. So this infographic just shows the percent of breaches from 2015 that the ITRC tracked, and their different categories: business with 40% of breaches, medical with 35%, government with 8%, banking, credit, financial with 9%, and education at 7%. So well-meaning insiders, these are company employees that inadvertently violate policies. Now, whether this is on the technological level, where they're violating things like within using systems, or this is on the personnel level, where we're talking about data being exposed, their laptops being stolen, email or webmail, removable devices. This just where this comes into play is employees emailing something to themselves, or storing things on a portable drive, or not encrypting all of their emails. There's a statistic that IBM tracked that 1 in every 400 emails is unencrypted and liable to getting hacked. Next, third-party data loss incidents. So this is sharing information with other people, whether that's suppliers or outside businesses, and leaving data open. And lastly, business processes automate spread of sensitive data. So this is processes that have lagged behind over time and that are accessible to being hacked. So next is targeted attacks. And targeted attacks are what we hear about most, just because of the way that they're portrayed. So targeted attacks are mostly stealing information for the purpose of identity theft. In today's world, these happen a lot. More than 90% of records breached in 2008 involve groups identified by law enforcement as organized crime. They do this by using malicious code most of the time to break into firm servers and extract data. The reason that these happen are system vulnerabilities, laptop servers not having the latest security patches. Next, improper credentials, whether that's employees or managers not having the strongest of passwords. Passwords are left on factory default settings, very easy for hackers to get into. Next is SQL injections. This is analyzing the URL syntax of targeted websites. Hackers are able to embed instructions to upload spyware that gives them remote access to the target servers. And lastly, targeted malware. This is something that we've heard about, and definitely I've heard about, especially in high school and things of the sort. Don't click on spam. Instant message communications, emails that are disguised to look one way but take you somewhere completely else and leave you open for hacking. And those are the main ways that a targeted attack comes along. Now, the way that targeted attacks occur are in 4 phases. First is incursion. These are routes of entry. System, as I mentioned, system vulnerabilities, passwords, SQL injection, targeted malware. Next is discovery, and map out systems and hunt for targets for compromise. This is them hunting for whatever they're going to extract or damage. Next is the capturing of exposed data, and lastly the exfiltration. This is getting data back to themselves in encrypted payloads. So lastly, the last type of major type of data breach is through malicious insiders. Now these are employees / former employees of the company, and this is unfortunately a growing segment of data breaches. We consider this a lot with white collar crime. A normal employee knowingly steals data as part of an identity theft. Such operations are perpetrated by company insiders who abuse their privileged access to information for the purpose of their own personal gain. We also see this with terminated employees, people that get laid off. However, their termination date does not line up with their access being restricted, and that unfortunately leaves a window of opportunity for people to access confidential data, email it to a private account, or copy it. And a recent study of the effects of employee terminations on data security revealed that 59% of ex-employees took company data, including customer lists and employee records. Next, and not so malicious, however, it's still with intent, but it still ends up being that way an outcome, is career building with company data. This can just be people using what they're working on within their current company, saving it to private servers, to their own personal servers, and using it to possibly get ahead or show off their own authority or competency in a different company. This is a problem because if their own personal servers get hacked, then that data could become exposed as well. And lastly, industrial espionage. This is probably the sexier wording on this, but basically, this is the unhappy or underperforming employee who plans to defect to the competition. And this is them sending examples of his or her work to a competing company as part of the application review process. So not good on any account. So who is to blame? Well, there's a lot of blame that goes around. Companies with bad data security habits, with bad data security procedures and business processes. The media portrays these companies as being inept or incompetent with their data. That's not always the case. It can usually be, one person's mishap, especially even with larger corporations. A lot of it has to do with targeted attacks. However, legal action has begun to take place against these companies in recent years. And we'll get to that a little bit further when we look at the ramifications. So implications for customers. So hundreds of millions of records exposed during 2015. And these unfortunately lead to identity theft, loss of trust in consumerism, especially in these specific companies. Medical record maluse. Medical records have become increasingly profitable on the black market. And so this is one thing that's been huge in recent years, is patients' medical records being used in a bad way, either against them or for somebody else's own personal gain. And lastly, financial loss and fraud. Unfortunately, one of the big issues facing cybersecurity is the loss of credit card info, as I said, identity theft, social security numbers, which leads to a lot of wrong transactions, false transactions made by customers' credit cards in these companies, which ultimately just loses out on customers' money, loses out on the company's money, and it doesn't look good for anybody. So implications for the businesses. So the biggest is a huge hit on reputation. These companies that get hit with these data breaches are labeled inept. Sanctions are brought against them. But the biggest issue is that, quite simply, their customers lose major amounts of trust in them. Because how are you going to do business with a company that can't even keep your data safe? You give them this data in transaction for their service, their product, and there's no way that you're going to continue to buy their product, use their service if they can't keep those safe. In terms of cost, the average total cost of a breach is up to $4 million. IBM reported that this year. It was up from $3.8 million last year. The average cost per record is $158 as a whole. However, healthcare actually tops this at $355 per record. As I said, health records are becoming more and more profitable on the black market. And lastly, lawsuits and being held responsible for damages. We're seeing it more and more that class action lawsuits are being brought against these businesses. In addition, the healthcare and medical companies are being brought against sanctions by HIPAA privacy laws, but that's only in cases of maluse or specifically instances where the company is found to be at fault because of negligence of their cybersecurity or their information security practices. The legal ramifications, as I said, HIPAA sanctions and fines. class action lawsuits and settlements. This is new, though. Federal Trade Commission. In 2015, a U.S. appellate court ruled that the FTC has authority to sue companies for damages. This was brought about by Wyndham Hotels, a large hotel chain, had exposed 600,000 records, customer records, in a data breach, and they were being charged with 10 million of fraudulent charges because of these data breaches, and they found that they had been negligent in how they were keeping this data and how they were protecting this data. Now, while it's unlikely that those charges will actually ever be sought out, this case brought up a landmark shift in that the FTC can now begin to have a backing to overlooking these sanctions and overlooking these companies. So, possible prevention. There's a lot of ways to prevent this. The biggest thing to know, though, is that all data breaches are preventable, but it's all about reducing risk. That's the biggest issue, is reducing risk. So, first of all, know where your data is and how it is stored, and lastly, implement procedures on both a technical and a personal level. There's a lot of ways to do this. IBM reported that appointing a chief information officer in your company saves, on average, $7 per record. Involving business continuity management saves $9 a record. Threat sharing saved $9. Extensive encryption use saved $13. And lastly, investing in an incident response team saved $16 on average per record across all companies interviewed by IBM in 2015. Now, what does this mean? This means that there are ways to do this. It's about being proactive, and it's about using these strategies in successful ways. The only strategies with the chance of success are both risk-based and content-aware. It's all about risk reduction, and you have to know where your data is stored, where it is going, how it is used. Only when you will be able to clearly identify problematic practices, prioritize data in groups for phased remediation, and begin to staunch the flow of proprietary data leaving your organization. So, case study real quick. Anthem Medical Insurer, the second largest medical or health insurer in the United States, was the victim of a data breach in 2015. 80 million records compromised. This was the biggest healthcare breach ever. And this was a targeted attack by outside influences. Now, luckily, in this attack, no credit card information was stolen. So because of that, because of the fact that there was no patient records stolen, no medical history stolen, there's no HIPAA sanctions going on for Anthem. Now, they did the right thing, though, in the fact that as soon as they knew about this, they contacted the FBI, because one of the biggest ways to be able to get this data back or to solve these issues once they have arrived is speed. Speed in finding the issue, speed in solving the issue, because left unchecked, hackers can decode and leave absolutely no trace of their existence in your system if you take too long to figure it out. They contact the FBI. FBI is currently still working on this case. However, though, the biggest issue has been class action lawsuits, and as I mentioned before, the loss of reputation. And these lawsuits have sprung up all over the country, especially in the 14 states that Anthem has customers. It's unfortunate, but the real issue is that they're going to have to answer for this in some sort of way. And while these things are still pending and still ongoing, they're rising into the tens of millions of dollars in damages. So, epilogue. IT and business serves many functions, but it's time to up our game. Cybersecurity is a relatively new concept, but must be made more aware. Be knowledgeable and proactive to stop data breaches. They are harmful to everyone and can always be prevented. So thank you very much. These are my works cited. I am Taylor Moorman again, and thank you for listening to cybersecurity and its implications.